We're joined today by author John C. A. Manley, author of All the Humans Are Sleeping, which was released just a few weeks ago. Hello, John.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me back. It's only been, 2 months?
Yeah, it's good to see you again. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, John. So why don't I begin by reading the review that I put on Amazon, just as I did last time we spoke about your previous novel, Much Ado About Corona. I
As long
called it,
as it's a good review.
oh, yeah, well, you be the judge, you tell me.
Okay.
I called it riveting. In All the Humans Are Sleeping, John C. A. Manley skillfully crafts a compelling post-apocalyptic psychological drama where a man faces his ultimate challenge: follow the rest of humanity into a life of shallow fantasies and comfortable lies, or face death in a harsh and unforgiving world, devoid of love and hope. And then there's the robot. You won't predict the ending, and you won't be able to put it down. So what do you think, John? Is that a good review or not?
Oh yeah, I like it. I like it. I think you caught a lot of the feeling of the story,
Yeah, and I
especially
found
and the robot. That's great.
that's a sort of a teaser.
And the
Because
robot takes the edge off, I think,
yeah, I think
ironically.
if any novel could have two protagonists, it would be this particular one because it is like a parallel story going on here in the mind of the human and in the circuitry of the robot.
hmm I think a lot of it was me trying to, I don't know, express my feeling about our, humans developing a relationship with technology
Hmm.
in some ways.
It's very timely, especially now with the advent of AI coming into its own.
No,
And
absolutely. And when I started writing this 20 years ago, I thought AI was just going to be, I didn't actually think it would develop as far as it has.
I used it constantly. I use Grok on X as my preferred one. I've used ChatGPT, but Grok I find to be the more reliable and up to date. I mean, it's up to date to the minute because it uses X posts as
Ah,
its material from which it draws its answers. Now, this particular novel, John, you said it in the year 2141 ish. That's where
hmm
it starts off. But I don't know if you've ever seen the television series Max Headroom. It's both British and American versions of it.
I
But it always
vaguely
started
remember it.
off. Hmm?
I remember that vaguely, or the movie at least.
Yeah, it started. Oh yes, the movie as well. It started off with the caption 15 minutes into the future or something to that effect.
Oh,
And I always found that interesting because it was a little dystopian, but it was supposed to be just like tomorrow or 15 minutes into the future. And this is like feeling I got from reading your book, All the Humans Are Sleeping, because it incorporates so many elements that are today right with us. The AI, the threat of nuclear war, so real today, and a United Nations that is itself trying to propel us into a dystopian, a post apocalyptic war. So I got that feel from it. It's very modern, it's very up to date, and yet it took you 20 years to write. Do you want to tell us about the process? Why it took you so long to write this book? It's not even that big. What is it?
no.
It's got just over 300 pages.
Yeah, it's 65,000 words, which is a kind of a short novel these days, and certainly shorter than Much Ado About Corona, which I wrote before. Much Ado About Corona was 150,000 words, so it was more than twice as long. Um, well, no, I started this. I mean, the big inspiration for this was actually just that one scene in The Matrix, which everyone probably knows is, when Neo wakes up and realizes that he's been living in this pod and thinking that he's been living in this fantasy. Wow, their fantasy world was pretty grim because it was just like life here. I think they actually dealt with that once in the film where they had said that they tried doing in a utopian version and the humans, I can't remember if they just couldn't handle a utopian existence. But I did it the opposite. I did go for the utopian existence, which, well, the next novel is called All the Humans Are Dying, so maybe I'm in agreement with the producers of The Matrix that a utopian reality was not sustainable. Though I had a lot more freedom than I think they had in The Matrix. Like it's kind of ironic in The Matrix, like they had this, this facsimile world that they created, but it's always in New York. Every scene in the movie is in New York. So, and as you know, with this, I cover, you know, wide geographical ranges inside the metaverse and times. But no, but the main feeling was this idea of someone waking up and realizing they were in this pod. And that's actually where I started the story originally, was with Peter having been in the metaverse for, I think in the original version was like 75 years, and the robot was taking him out. So that was a seed for the story, and it's gone through so many metamorphoses since then, over 20 years, though it sat on a shelf for probably 5 or 7 years. Um, yeah, so it's
Yeah, the just to run down some of the characters we may be discussing. Peter Stevens is a central figure. He's a farmer just outside of Winnipeg, and his wife Sarah, his daughter Rebecca, she plays a large role in it. There's the UN Secretary General Alejandro Guillermo, and and of course in the metaverse as Tony,
mhm.
and also so there's not a lot of few characters, but there's also
Oh, you forgot the
a
key one, the one
yes,
everyone likes the most.
Dr. Marta Wink.
Oh no, I was thinking Domestico.
Oh, of course, Domestico and Brent Saris. He oversees the installation of a fiber optic uh, network, and Domestico, the robot, Unit D293. And of course, Dr. Marta Wink. You start every chapter with a quote from a book by her, and she's right, and you're reading from a quote from the future, a couple of hundred years in the future, about 250 years in the future. And it was so, we see a lot of that these days. And this is where I want to ask you about your writing craft, because where I first encountered that was in the novel Dune by Frank
Oh,
Herbert.
I
And
don't
of
remember it
course,
in there.
yeah, at the very beginning of every chapter, he quotes from different texts, made up texts, of course, like yours. But
Hmm.
like this one starts, a novel begins with this quote: "A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct." And that's from Manual of Moadib by the Princess Irulan.
Yeah, I
I
remember
remember
now.
that from back in the 70s when I read it. Of course, that goes back to the 60s. So, what prompted you? What is the purpose of having this self-referential type of quotes at the beginning of the chapters?
Probably three reasons, and hopefully I'll remember all three by the time I get to the end of them. One, I thought it was an easy way to do info dumps without hurting the narrative.
Yeah.
So I covered a lot of that, because I don't like it when you get these long info dumps where there's certain technical information, especially in a science fiction like this, that you have to, well, you don't have to, but it definitely adds a layer of authenticity to the story, and understanding to the story. So it kind of made it feel like this was of historical it was almost the reverse of what Tolkien did in Lord of the Rings, where he would reference things that happened before the times in the story. Like there would be old castles that were disintegrating, and we're already looking at a time that's, so this was sort of the reverse of what Tolkien did. So it was for that, the authenticity of it. And then, and there was one little fun thing in there because I'm not sure if you figured it out. I'm curious. Dr. Marta Wink's an anagram.
Oh, no, for what?
Mark Twain.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
of course, throughout the book you talk about Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why I didn't notice that.
Well, that's what I kind of hope, is at some subconscious level, everyone notices it and it's kind of sitting there, and it adds just that extra layer. The other fun thing with Marta Wink too is she references even things that are true in our reality. Like she references like the Terminator movie. She references Gasparo with the playing Deep Blue with the original chess match between human and machine, where
Yeah.
the machine finally won. And it was kind of funny when I was doing the audiobook version of this. I would actually when I was in the sound booth, there was occasional times with the Marta Wink stuff that the sound engineer would actually stop and he just wanted to know, is that true or is that fiction? Like referring to, for example, the Svalbard seed bolt that's on an archipelago north of Norway. And that's true. There is actually this gigantic seed bolt that's supposed to have, I think, 960,000 crop seeds in it. And and it was nice the way the story actually worked out, where I actually ended up locating it by accident very close to the Svalbard seed vault. So it tied together. So it's kind of fun because it added that a little more fact to it, and then it's kind of hard to tell where the facts and the fiction depart. Like even Santa Gallus, the large statue of Santa Claus that they had in the woods outside of the where the story is located in the second half. That's real too. I didn't make that up. So
Yeah, your research is quite impeccable for both of the novels that I've read from you. It's quite an accomplishment to get into the different languages, the geographies, and the technical things that you obviously research in depth to come up with your story. But that's the dump you talked about, and the three reasons for having these chapter openings were a technical dump.
yeah, then that authenticity, and then it was just to tie in things that came before that are currently true in our reality, and then to do a little foreshadowing, and then the Mark Twain anagram.
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay, yeah.
not sure that's a very valid reason, but it was fun.
Hey, fun is a reason. Fun is
Yeah.
always a reason. So,
And this type of story needed as much fun that I could slip into it because the original version was much grimmer. And
oh,
I was
really?
relieved. Yeah.
Because I found this book to be rather brutally intense regarding the psychological problem faced by the protagonist, Peter Stevens, when he's faced with this post-apocalyptic. Not really giving anything away here. You mention it
Go ahead.
in the write-up to the book that it's after a nuclear war that destroys basically everything. So he has faced this dilemma of hooking up to a machine, much like Neo in the Matrix, which you give ample credit to in your book, and living a life of whatever he wants, he can get, and you cannot really tell the difference between is it real or is it fantasy, or him coming to the realization that this is fantasy, live his life or not outside of this metaverse. So when you get into the mind of Peter, I found it rather brutal, a brutal treatment of that subject.
It was hard. I I also was trying to touch on the idea of whether it's crucial or not for human beings to actually be living in a human body too. Because when they're in this matrix, it's sort of like their mind has been disconnected from their physical form, and then um, the only thing they're aware of is the sensory information coming in via the metaverse, and any input they send out goes into the metaverse. So the body is basically there to just keep the brain alive, which is something I've struggled with a lot throughout my life because I see that on like two sides of the spectrum. We're starting to see this with, the video game era and the tech era where people are almost disembodied, where they live inside, either it's a video game or social media, especially the younger generation. And I'm not criticizing it necessarily because I think there's a place for all that. And I'm not, but it's when one gets lost in it. And
Yeah.
one could say the same. I'm saying people used to say the same about novels. When novels first came out, I was like, guy's just sitting there, he's lost in his novel, So it's the criticism probably pertains to both.
They've done that as well in Hollywood. Remember that, forget the name of the movie now, Tom Hanks. They're playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, and he gets so wrapped up in it, his reality becomes that.
Yeah, yeah, where he's not even aware of his physical identity anymore. And then on the flip side, we see this in a lot of spiritual traditions where the body is considered a negative thing that should be avoided or surmounted or ignored or renounced.
Wasn't
Uh,
it, was it the Hermann Hesse's novel Siddhartha, where he talks about how the Buddha was ready to release his body by not even eating and not attending to his body? Or is this actually the story of the Buddha? I don't know. And somebody comes along and says no, or his mind tells him no, you have to take care of the body. That is why you're here, so that your mind can progress. A little bit of Eastern mysticism here, but I thought
yeah,
I'd throw that in.
yeah, no, that's exactly true. Because he had thought he could just fast and uh, deny all the needs of his body. To some degree, I still think it's only a step closer to the truth, though, what he claimed, because then he just kind of, acknowledged, okay, I got to feed the thing, I got to keep it warm. But it still wasn't, I got to really experience life through a body, or I have to enjoy life through a body. And actually, I think that was the wonderful thing about Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, because the character in that actually seems to come to that realization. He kind of goes to the opposite extreme at one point where he's like sleeping with a prostitute. So, and then he kind of finds the middle ground and he raises a son. And um, so, and that's part of, that's a really, like when I grew up in high school, one of the themes I think of the book was when in high school, I suddenly realized about halfway through high school that we didn't have dance class. Like everything in school is about the head mainly. There's the gym class and sports, but that's kind of fit in there, and it's not even mandatory after grade 10. And it can be so competitive, and a lot of people end up getting ostracized from it. But on the whole, you know, education growing up is very heady, and the body's treated like a way to get the brain from class to class. And
yes, it's true.
whilst in the novel, we actually have Domestico, the robot, who's actually somewhat envious of humans because he's starting to realize that their embodiment in a human body is what allows them to do such beautiful things.
It's almost like the Data from Star Trek Next Generation envying the humans for their suffering and what they feel. And even like when this is getting a little nerdish, but when Q becomes a human, he says, "Oh, what's that? It's hunger pang, right?" And he goes, "Well, how awful, you know."
Yeah, yeah.
But Data loves the fact that he would like to have those experiences, pain and pleasure. That's another part of your novel as well. Is it's talking about challenges. There's a quote here. Let me see if I can go. Yes. There's a few quotes here I'd like to talk about. Well, this is one. In the metaverse, he could run faster than a cheetah and fly higher than an eagle, yet for some reason, pushing a walker around that small room after 8 weeks of painful physio had felt more rewarding. I'd have to concur. There's no reward without pain sometimes.
Yeah, or at least struggle. And pain. Yeah, and I think, and if we want to go a little Buddhist on it, I do appreciate the concept that you can have pain without suffering. That suffering is when you're fighting the pain.
Hmm.
And I think that because, like you said, the pain produces a result, and that journey, that painful, slow escalation to a better state. I mean, I would find I've never been a big fan of video games growing up. Like I never played them much because I always found them. I got a little addicted to Tetris for quite a while. That was like turning into an addiction. But otherwise, I like the games where it was just like you're shooting things. To me, it was just it just seemed like a way to pass the time, but I didn't find any satisfaction. And I'm like, I have firearm training and stuff, so I'm not against guns or anything. I actually find that much more challenging, going out and trying to hit a real target instead of where I just kind of have to aim the joystick a little and then the monster explodes and then another one appears. So,
I don't necessarily, like you, don't necessarily object to having entertainment. Sports is an example. I was just at a Christmas party, met a fellow there who was a big hockey fan. He wanted to talk about that, and I say, I don't watch sports. I don't mind playing them.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's like I want to watch other people have fun.
It's like, who cares who wins?
Yeah, maybe if you're your son or something, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But that's the same thing. It's like it's a diversion. It's a way of keeping your mind or even your body occupied, and to forget the mundane things that we have to go through living.
Mm-hmm.
No objection to that until it comes to the point of addiction and it becomes all consuming. I think there was I wrote to you about this, the novel, the book rather, Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business, a novel, or book rather, I have not read. However, the theme is very much in line with what you're talking about here, where he actually talks about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and the drug soma
Oh
for
yeah.
sleep, right? It's a fictitious drug in Brave New World, which keeps people sedated or at least not challenged.
Yeah. Sort of like the metaverse.
Yeah. Is there anything having to do with Steve, with what's his name? Who invented Microsoft?
Oh, Bill Gates?
Bill Gates, thank you. Bill Gates is Meta. Or no, is that Meta or is that Zuckerberg's Meta?
Yeah, Zuckerberg's Meta.
Zuckerberg. Yeah, these billionaires, I keep getting them confused.
Yeah, it was definitely a play on what he was proposing. I mean, to me, it's the goggles. The state of the technology right now. They're not using implants like in the novels. They're using goggles, or I think they got another term for them, not goggles, headsets. Which the return rate on them has been extremely high because people find it's nauseating and causes headaches, and it's just too disassociated from the body that I think they realize, eventually implants would probably be, if they're possible. I don't know, medically they're even, or biologically, the body's just going to reject them. But if they are possible, I mean, so far you want to look at horrible things. Like they've been trying to do implant technology on primates for quite a while, especially at some universities in California, and the death rates on the primates is astounding. Massive tumors forming in the head around the implants.
Oh,
It's like even the most the animal rights organization's been going crazy over it, but they've been getting actually in the court system support and has been putting a halt on these types of experiments because of just the level of cruelty that it seems to put upon the animal to have these disgusting tumors, cracking their skulls. But before the tumors take over, they can have the monkey sit there and play simple video games just with their brain, just thinking, and they can control the images on the screen.
well, Elon Musk's Neuralink is working on that too. So
Yeah.
there again, we're 15 minutes into the future.
I'm afraid at this point, I think they'll probably figure out how to do it. If you asked me 20 years ago when I started writing that book, I thought everything was total fiction. I didn't think we'd have artificial intelligence to the level it is already. So I'm open to the possibility of it existing. I'm not open to the possibility of signing up for the trial.
Yeah. There's another quote in here I quite enjoyed. Without physical reality, without physical consequences, morality had become obsolete. That's from Dr. Martha Wink, alias Mark Twain. But again, you talk about very heady stuff in here, and morality is one of them. And if you're living a life in the metaverse where there are no consequences for your thoughts or the actions you take in that metaverse, you're living a life that Bob Metz and I talk about before, for example, with robots, or if you're immortal, there can be no consequences to your life, so therefore you cannot act immorally, which is quite a heady topic to think about. But you
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I said, but you do it. You take it on here.
Yeah, yeah. It's it comes a lot back to John Galt's speech in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, where he makes the analogy that even if you were on a deserted island by yourself, morality would actually be even more imperative because Ayn Rand's philosophy was that the premise of morality was the maintenance and prosperity, well, maintenance of life and the improvement of life. But the metaverse situation really changes a lot of that because in some ways, whatever you can just have whatever you want to fantasize. Not that any of it's real. And well, it isn't because obviously the consequences, and this gets going to be dealt with in the second novel, is can someone sustain themselves living in a pod of synthetic amniotic fluid on a life support system and basically just trying to ignore their physical form? How long can they last in this type of reality? Just on a physical level, no less a psychological level. So I think in the long run, there's no morality about how you harm other people, but being in the metaverse in that type of inhuman condition, I think would be harmful to the person themselves.
Yeah, which would make it immoral.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I try to use the word ethical when it relates to actions regarding other people, and
That's good
moral
to.
when it regards to actions of sustaining myself, right? Or improving oneself,
I'm
although
gonna write
they
that
can be
down.
interchangeable.
Well, no, it's kind of good to have those types of distinctions, especially since we got such a big vocabulary in English. Um, and I mean, the other thing I thought, that the reason they're going to the metaverse, I think I dealt with quite a bit was they're trying to run away from their emotions and their memories.
Yes.
Partly because, their whole world just got destroyed. But that happens to all of us at times in our, figuratively, where our world gets destroyed. Either sometimes we lose something or sometimes we get hurt. Um, you know, there's extreme cases where people lose a loved one, or there's extreme cases where maybe they're in a serious accident or they're raped. There's things that destroy your world, and are we going to run away from the memories and run away from the feelings? And even in the metaverse, like, deal with that where there's like they're not allowed to express sadness. Like that's one of the few things they can't do in the metaverse is be sad. Well, they can feel sad inside, but they can't do anything to express sadness. It was kind of iffy on anger. I wasn't quite clear where I was going with that one, but because it can be violent. There was no
Oh,
problem with being violent, but it wasn't showing any negative emotions was considered so-called negative emotions was considered non-utopian.
it wasn't lost on me that the character of the United Nations General, what's his name? Uh,
Alejandro Guillermo.
yes, the UN Secretary General in the metaverse was a very violent and loved gore, and violence and gratuitous, and he was quite a reprehensible character. And I thought that fit in quite well with his title. But that's just a personal observation,
No, I
considering that
understand.
he had a hand in destroying the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, you can tell he well, he this the speech actually that would be if there's one of the highlights in that book I thought was when he gives his there these types of novels there's like a key factor you always have to have in there is a speech, the villain's speech, and he has that with Domestico where he basically describes humans as a cancer on the planet, and that this was putting them in the metaverse until they all die off was just kind of a humane way to get rid of them. And
And that is not so far from the truth what we hear today. It's far from the truth, but it's not
yeah,
so far from what we hear today. There are people saying that exact same thing.
yeah.
Famous people, rich people. Here's another quote for you, John. Your thoughts on this. Page 268. That's the problem we humans have had for however long we've existed. We have no idea what's real, what's not. We make up stories about gods, goddesses, or even the one true God to cover up the fact that life seems pointless. You're starting to depress me, replies Peter. I like that. Like, again, a little bit of humor in there always goes a long way, but that's so true. I keep telling some people when we get into heady discussions, we're all staring into the abyss. Some people have answers, some people don't, some people want but can't. I don't know. But we're all faced with that reality that we're all mortal. And that's dealt with in your novel as well, quite skillfully, I think. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Like I said, you're before we started recording, I think I called your novel brutal, the way it treats some of these things.
Well, I did want to be brutal with it. I did set up a situation where the choice would be very difficult, where you got a world that's destroyed and depopulated. It's like, are you going to just still try to be a human being under those circumstances? And then it comes down to the question of what is the point of it all, which, um, and there is a contrast too in the novel with Brent Saris and Peter. I mean, Brent Saris is going to be a much more focal point in the next novel because he is not. I don't know if he sees a point to everything, but he believes there is, and I mean that's where I lean. And even if I don't understand the point, because I think a lot of it comes down to like I love the theme behind Life of Pi, which was the argument there was, well, there might not be a point to anything. There might not be any intelligence in anything, but might as well just act like there is, because there's a good chance it could be true, and you'll be happier. And it doesn't really is if it's only going to make your life better to think there is a purpose to everything, then why not go for it?
Well, I do believe, and this is a personal belief, but I think that you may believe it too. Tell me if you don't. Ayn Rand did give a purpose to life, and it's your own happiness, it's your own productivity. Right?
Hmm.
Happiness through productivity. Live your life. She wanted to call her philosophy existentialism, but it was taken. So she called it objectivism. Means the world exists whether you do or not, and it doesn't care about whether you do or not. So the best thing to do is to exist and to be productive and happy. And that to me is a purpose. So, for that sense, there is a purpose to life. Whether or not that purpose extends past your life, that's the philosophic question or the theologic question, I think.
Yeah, and the metaphysical one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I dealt quite a somewhat with that too, because in the novel, when Peter does come back out of the metaverse and he's working in the greenhouse with the robot who can pick, produce at a phenomenally fast rate, to the point that Peter helping with farming almost seems like there's no practical reason for him to do it. But at the same time, he's enjoying it so much, participating in the farming and even in his debilitated state. So I think it comes down to a lot of that. And I think I'm hoping that's the world we're going towards, where our needs are going to be diminishing because of technology, where people will have more opportunity to pursue actually what they want in life instead of what their, bare necessities, like just trying to get enough food and shelter and heat. So like I'm all for like robots doing mundane chores. I like when people say, "Oh, it's going to take away work." It's like, find something else to do. I mean, I got like tons of stuff. Like every time I have to do it, like I hire actually, a lot of, I don't hire robots, but I hire humans. Like I live in a small apartment, but I hire an assistant who helps me for like 2-3 hours a day just doing chores, because I want the time to write brutal books like this. Even if it didn't make me a penny, I'd keep writing them because I enjoy it. I mean, when it's a finished product like that, and I see the same with people in other fields, like it doesn't even have to be just the arts, but music or so forth. But I know people who, was it sports or I know people even like, I know this one man, he likes setting up banks, It's just what he's into. He likes numbers and that kind of thing, and he helps set up banks, and he just feels this great satisfaction. Similar like in Atlas Shrugged, a lot of those were more industrial, technical jobs that the characters had, and they found, great satisfaction in knowing they created a railway that was moving people across. That wouldn't be for me. Like I didn't appreciate the challenge, but I wouldn't wake up every day thinking, I really want to make sure that line from Denver gets all the way to San Francisco. It's just not going to light me up. But so
challenge, yeah.
Yeah, anything, and I think I think what we're seeing is a lot of people. It's more a self-esteem issue that the human race is probably going to be forced to go through, because if you're not willing to push yourself to do something challenging, you're going to become obsolete. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I hope that's in an encouraging way. And maybe they won't. Maybe they can just sit around playing video games because everything's being taken care of for them. I don't know. I don't think that will last long. I think they'll get bored.
The thing about you bring up Atlas Shrugged again, and I love that novel too. People maligned Ayn Rand because, she's talked about millionaires and industrialists. It's not a book for me. And yet, if they read the book, when these industrialists shrugged,
Mm-hmm.
what did they do? They went into what normally people would refer to as mundane jobs. A great composer became a conductor on a railway. Some industrialist became a short order cook in a greasy spoon. And they excelled at what they did, even though we may have thought it was a mundane job that anybody could do. They did it best, and they didn't do it for other people. They did it for their own self-worth. They did it for themselves. They were productive, and they did the best they could. It just so happens that they were industrialists before they shrugged, But after they shrugged, they were still that same person striving to be productive. So, yeah, when you bring up that Peter in the greenhouse, he's only plucking, or harvesting the fruits or vegetables, or whatever, and he's not really making a contribution to the effort as a
Hmm.
whole. He's doing it for himself.
Yeah. That's been a big theme in my life the last few years. I mean, the COVID stuff kind of triggered that in a lot of ways because that was when everyone was being told to supposedly live for other people, which was like a double whammy of falsehood because the things we were being asked to do weren't of any benefit to anyone, including other people. But I think one of the scariest and hardest things for people to do is what they really want in life.
It is. It becomes scary because you wonder, there's always in the back of your mind, am I going to fail at the thing that I
Hmm.
really want to be? Yeah, understood. I neglected to mention, you've brought it up a couple of times, but this is the Metaverse trilogy, book one. You've alluded to book two, and obviously there's going to be a book three.
All the humans are waking. So all the humans are sleeping, all the humans are dying, all the humans are waking. That's all I know too. That's all I know about the second and third book.
Yes, you've called yourself a discovery writer,
Yeah.
not one who necessarily plans the plot of a novel from beginning to end, but one who sits. I shouldn't say you sit down. Apparently, you stand up
Yeah.
to write.
I do everything with standing desks and so
Can
forth.
you tell us about that? How did that evolve? How did you get to do that?
Originally I used to do everything sitting down. Like I'm only sitting down now because we're doing this interview and you were sitting. I just felt like it'd just be weird if I was standing. So, and also I'm having a little trouble with my tripod, so it was kind of the perfect angle. But I could turn this. I could probably switch cameras because you could see it's a standing desk and so forth. And then I got on the wall there where I do write on the wall. Originally I was actually a more of to save money on my chiropractor because I just found sitting, I was getting neck and back pain a lot and like severe back pain. I was seeing a chiropractor almost every other day for a while, and that adds up a lot of money. They got a good gig there. Um, and so I started getting more into physical activity. I started taking regulated breaks every 30 to 40 minutes because I was just in too much pain. But the other thing I started to study was, well, it kind of gets a little heady, but was, well, actually, why don't I put it this way? It's interesting because if you know, standing desks were the thing up until like the 1900s, even because if you look back, like in Charles Dickens novels, for example, you'll see
Yeah.
lawyers and clerks and everyone have standing desks. The idea of sitting down and working was like a contradiction to them. That's why they had, I think the British had, sitting rooms because when it was time to sit, we had a
Yeah.
special room for
You
it.
sit to relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to forget your work. But you don't actually just write at a writing desk. You put the piece of paper on the wall. There's a
Yeah.
picture of it in Much Ado About Corona. You put a piece of paper on the wall and you actually write on the wall. It's bizarre.
Well,
You
it's
forgive
great.
me for saying so, but it is bizarre.
I like, well, Ernest Hemingway did the exact same thing. So I'm not the only one who's ever done it. But I just found I was just more comfortable for me, partly because I have poor eyesight too. So, I found I would tend to probably hunch over, and that's probably why I was having more back pain than maybe normal. I would tend to arch a little too close to see what I was doing because I like to have it in my handwriting to be legible after when I have to transcribe it. So I find that the writing on the wall, it just allows perfect posture. And then, of course, I was a portrait artist for about 4 years. I studied in Florence and so forth, and so I got used to working at an easel all the time, also. So
Wow.
that might have influenced it.
Now, speaking of art and fine art, the cover art for this book was done by Jordan Henderson. Do you want to speak a bit about his fine work here?
Yeah, here's a version without the proofing ribbon across the front because you got a very early
Oh,
copy.
sorry. I didn't realize it, but yes, this band across here is basically, it says not for resale. So
Yeah, yeah, yours has a few more typos. Uh, yeah, well, that's what this was, and actually, there was a big debate over this cover when I first put it out. People couldn't figure out who is the model for this. Half of them thought it
yeah.
was Jordan, and half of them thought it was me. So,
It does look a lot like Jordan
yeah,
Henderson.
it's Jordan Henderson.
Yeah.
Of course, this picture's at the back of the book. Actually, You could probably put up the clip if you want, but just to him actually painting it.
Sure.
But he, yeah, it was pretty brutal. I had to have him incubated in ICU and intubated. I mean, not incubated, intubated in ICU, wires drilled into his head. What he's willing to do for art is just phenomenal. The screaming was intense, but he's okay now. It's like we took all the implants out, and the doctor says he should be out of the hospital in a few weeks.
You are joking, of course. But it's yes, it's just like the cover of this book. I think depicts the mood of a lot of it, and that is it's dark and it's a little brutal, as I said before, and intense. Although you do again pepper it with a bit of humor here and there.
A
But
touch
other
of
than that,
beauty. There's some beautiful moments in the story too, I think. Even just especially with the Northern Lights and Domestical's appreciation for the beauty of the North, which I did enjoy from a research point of view, exploring a lot of these areas. Like I've never been to the Baffin Islands where some of it's set, and it was places I've always wanted to be. I have been to Norway, but southern Norway, not northern Norway. And I don't know, but yeah, definitely. And the cover is actually done mainly in charcoal and pastel, so there's actually not too much paint involved. So it does have that a touch of a Rembrandt feeling, maybe. And then when I saw it the first time, partly with the overgrown hair and beard, it has a bit of a crucifixion feel to it, also.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting. He's martyred himself for an ideal, that the ideal being a reality, or is he martyring himself and joining a fantasy? You know?
Because when you look at it from a human, like a physical human point of view, it looks horrible. Like if you're in the mind in the metaverse and it's this, Pleasure Island Pinocchio thing, personally, I find that a bit not too attractive myself, but I understand people do. I don't know why I don't, but I think from a purely somatic point of view, it's horrible, this concept of drilling holes in people's heads and their spine, inserting wires and connecting their nervous system, bypassing their body, having to like put tubes up every entrance. We got tubes going up their nose, through their mouth, in their lungs, up their bowels, catheters. I mean, this is like typically when someone's in a state like this in our current day, we think they're on death's door. I mean, it's a horrible state to be in ICU. And yet then in this story, we got billions of people volunteering to have that done to them because they're able to ignore, any awareness of their physical form. And we have this happening already. Like I just read a few months ago, this kid in, I think it was Korea, he played a video game nonstop for like something like 46 hours and had a heart attack. And he was just a young kid, but just going without sleep and just forcing his body to sit there. I don't know if he took bathroom breaks or ate anything, but this,
I think South Park did an episode on something like that.
okay. Because I do think humans we're running that. I think we saw it really severely during the COVID period, where it was very anti-human, and that's I think where the themes of the novels overlap, because people were. It was more, we weren't allowed to have interaction with other people, which is also what this deals with.
In your book, you research it so well, John. And one of the researchers I know personally, Andrew Brannan, registered nurse, who helped you with a lot of the medical stuff you're just referring to, the tubes and the telling a tibia from a femur.
Yeah. No, I was very grateful for. Well, the tibia, the femur thing was interesting because that's where I actually in this novel have what's it called? An osseo drill, which is a bone drill. I had actually discovered that back when I was writing Much Ado About Corona, that I didn't know what, maybe most people know about these, but just in case, it's like an actual drill that allows you to insert a cannula into bone so that you can get medication into someone's body, because apparently if you put it right into the bone marrow, it will go into the blood circulation. And this is useful in cases where it's very difficult to insert it into the veins and arteries. And a lot of that happens, especially in situations like in this story where they're doing rescue missions with helicopters, and it's because of helicopters rocking back and forth. It's sometimes very difficult to
Yeah.
insert an IV in those situations. So in Much Ado About Corona, I really wanted to use this osseo drill. I was like really excited about it. I just couldn't fit it into the story. And already at the end of Much Ado About Corona, I've had two readers say they almost lost consciousness because it got gory enough with the medical stuff, with the chest tubes and stuff like that. So, but Andrew and I had interviewed Andrew quite a bit about it because I said, did you ever get to use one of these? Because he's been an ER nurse for quite a long time. And he says he only got to use it once because I think it's more used in the field. But they had some lady from a local prison. She was a prisoner that had came in and she was very hysterical and they just couldn't get her under control. So the only way they could get an IV into her was to use the osseo drill, and he got to do it himself. And
Mm.
I don't know why I find this so fascinating. It's probably slightly disturbing to some people hearing this, but
You know what I find disturbing, John, is the research lengths you went to find out what it's like to be tased in your last novel. Tell everybody about that, because I just learned about it when you sent out your newsletter last week. And by the way, if people are interested, they can go to blazingpinecone.com and purchase the books and sign up for John's letters, which I find fascinating. So tell us, John, about your research into getting tased. What did you do?
well, well, you got to keep in mind is when you're dealing with a fiction writer, it's always hard to know where the fiction starts and the facts start. But because I did have the problem with the novel when I was writing it, because there is people who get tased in the novel, and I interviewed several people and done a lot of research online with people who had been tased, mainly professionals. Like in the U.S. military, it's required that you get tased as part of your training. The Canadian and American police force, for a while, it was required, but the unions rebelled against it so much that now it's not required, it's optional. So that means no one does it. You can volunteer as a citizen in the United States. Like they have classes where they'll actually tase you just to, I don't know, I guess it's practice for the cops and it all kind of works together. So, yeah, but I heard too many stories. Like some people said getting tased just felt like their body fell asleep, like when your leg falls asleep when it gets the nerve pinched or something.
Hmm.
No big deal. I had one police officer who got accidentally tased in a situation for 5 seconds, and he said it was the most painful 5 seconds he ever remembers in his whole life, and the 5 seconds seemed to go on forever. So I get these two different stories. Like the president of Taser, the company, because it's a brand name, he personally is tased by every single prototype. And he doesn't seem to mind. He just says, he just lays down, like he doesn't let himself fall because sometimes you can get hurt.
Yeah.
He just lays down on the ground and they tase him and it feels like my body fell asleep. So I wanted to do this realistically and trying to figure out, well, how does it feel to be tased? So I thought, and I checked with the local police station. They weren't willing to tase me. They said they don't do that in Stratford. It's like small town. They're just like, sorry. And it was during COVID time too. So they don't even want to see people, no less tase them. And they probably want me to wear a mask while I was tased. And I didn't want to do that. So I thought the best thing to do was just commit a small felony that, wouldn't like mar my criminal record. I don't have a criminal record. Amazingly, I've had so many encounters with police over the last 4 years, but I've never been charged. Been encountered for things like walking with large groups in parks and entering buildings without being masked and unvaccinated getting like a cup of tea and then actually sitting down at the table and refusing to leave for 45 minutes. It was funny because the cops, we're calling the cops. Okay. Cops take like 45 minutes to show up. They're like, come on, we gave you time to have your tea and get out of here. We don't want to charge you for trespassing. So I thought the best thing to do was just steal a bottle of hand sanitizer from a local convenience store. So the story is I ran into the convenience store, I grabbed the hand sanitizer and I ran out and I ran down the street past the police station, made a left. The police cars started blaring their siren. I ran by down an alley behind a fish and chip store that they closed down because they didn't vaccinate the fish. And get stuck in the back there, the two cops come out and they pull out the tasers and they're like, put the hand sanitizer down. And I got my hands up. Well, first they said, your hands up. I put my hands up. And they're like, okay, drop this hand sanitizer. And I'm like, not going to do it. Not going to do it. And they do the first taser, which I had heard when they do the wires, the wires shoot out and hit you. That's usually where it's not as painful because it depends how much clothes you have on. And where the wires hit you. If they actually get right into your skin, then you're going to get a direct charge. If you have like a winter jacket on, that reduces the current a lot. It also depends how far apart the barbs are. So like if you get a good shot is like you get one guy like right in the neck and then like in the leg, and then you're going to get a longer current. Yeah, they got me in the neck and the leg, let's just say, fell over. But the problem with tasing is it makes your muscles clench up. So I just held on to that hand sanitizer even stronger. And then because I wanted to try the drive stun, because that's where they don't use the wires, but they come right up on bare skin. So they did that, and that made me hold tighter. But after they released, because it's amazing with tasing, it feels incredibly painful or disturbing, but as soon as the charge is gone, it's all gone. There's like no residual effect. It's not like if you get shot with a bullet and they take the bullet out, it still hurts a lot for a long time. So yeah.
So you've heard?
Yeah, my wife was really against me doing the bullet thing because I thought if you just get shot in the leg, it's not going to be lethal. I mean, if you hit a major artery, you run that risk. But if you do it near the hospital, like in the ER, I don't like hospitals much, but I do have a very good respect for their ability to deal with traumatic cases like injuries and self-inflicted bullet wounds. Yes, but no, I haven't tried the bullet yet, and I probably won't.
So what did the judge say to all of this?
Well, he gave me 14 weeks of community service, picking up mass litter around the town. He thought it was a bit bizarre, but I think he appreciated the fact, that it was for the arts.
Anything for the art, eh?
Yeah, so we can let everyone decide whether this is a true story or a fictional story.
You are a writer of fiction, after all. Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners about your novel, John?
Let's see. I haven't looked at my list. Well, I did want to emphasize the idea that the novel is very much about us really deciding what it means to be human. Because I think being human involves having a physical body and being able to interact with the physical world. And it's not just, I think we're running the risk in some ways, and in some ways we're not. It depends which way we go with technology, where we could end up just trying to live everything in our head. Or because of the freedom technology gives us, we can actually start doing things that, we wouldn't be able to have done before, like more adventures, more exploring, more trips, more creating things that, that was another theme that I touched on quite a bit in the novel, was this idea that, yes, nature is beautiful and I do give it a lot of credit, but also humans' ability to do things, like we take nature and then we make stuff unique, It's like I made the analogy to we take horsehair and we take a tree and then we turn it into a violin and then we create Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And to me, I mean, I enjoy going, I run out every day and I listen to the birds when they're here. Right now, there's no birds. And I love that. But if I had to choose between listening to birds or listening to Vivaldi for the rest of my life, I'm going to pick Vivaldi.
So much for those people who think that humanity is a cancer on the planet. They're throwing away not only the bad things about humanity, and there certainly are a lot of those, but they're throwing away all the beauty as well. And the very fact that we have a right to exist, regardless of what these people think.
Yeah. Sometimes I hope they're not people. When you hear, I'm not into those far-fetched theories about reptilians and stuff like that, but I can see the attraction people have to that because we don't want to believe that these people are humans. And maybe at some level, like their reptilian brain is just too active. But no, I mean, I really feel that we're at this stage where we have a big opportunity. Well, the other place we have an opportunity too is even our ability to go within and discover who we really are and overcome a lot of, I think human beings have a tremendous amount of negative programming built into them that we acquire through different ways.
It's
Some of
true.
a lot of it's societal. Some of it's just, the result of growing up as a little kid where you don't have a lot of control over things, and then you end up developing survival methods to cope with the fact that you don't have control over everything, and then you get these kind of deficiency stories in your head and so forth. And now if technology is going to free up our time, we could do a lot of stuff, kind of inner self-improvement work. We can make the outer world better. We can make our inner world better. We can have time to actually try to understand these questions we have about why we're here, what we're doing, what's the whole purpose of being human. So I hope we just all don't go to sleep or blow ourselves up.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a very good narration voice, and the Audible version of this is available uh, from Audible and Amazon, which is Audible's
Hmm.
the company. But if you go to Amazon, you will find a sampling there of John narrating a little bit of his story. So I would suggest that they listen to that. If you're not inclined to buy the hard copy, then get the Audible copy, or why not get both?
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, you have a very good listening or voice for narration.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because coming from you, that's quite a compliment since you got the perfect like radio voice. Uh, I had to learn. It took me a while because there's a fair bit of German in the book too with Beethoven stuff. So I had to get tutors and learn how to sing parts of Ode to Joy, and then there's Norwegian and it just anytime I said anything in Canada, I have to like expand my indigenous vocabulary because we name so many of our places after indigenous cultures. Uh, but on that note, as far as free samples go, if they go straight to allthehumansaresleeping.com, they can get a free sample of the first 2 hours and 50 minutes of the novel in audiobook format. And then I believe it's the first 24 chapters in ebook format. And that's what I'd encourage people to do because like just go and listen to the first 2 hours or read the first, I think it's 100 pages. And if, at that point, if you don't want to keep reading, well, don't buy the book. But I think it's a fair trial, unless you're like me and you just like having a paperback, and then you're gonna have to go buy the paperback and take a risk. But well, all I can say, if you really don't like it, you can send it back to me and I'll give you a refund.
That's not going to happen, John. When I picked up this and your previous book, Corona, I love your crisp writing style. You're very matter of fact in your writing style, and it draws you in, and you're compelled to read the next chapter and then the next one. And I get up at about 4:30 in the morning. I have a cup of coffee. I go sit down and read for about an hour. I give myself, and then when I'd sit down with your books, it's like I'm there for longer than that. I'm a
Wow.
very slow reader. That's why it takes me so long to get to you, John.
No, I appreciate that. And it's hard to tell sometimes, especially this one after working on it for 20 years. The novelty was starting to wear off on me. So I was a little nervous when I first put it out, even to the beta readers. I was like, I'm not sure if anyone's going to like this. But one thing that shocked me, and this will have to be my last story, was my neighbor. She's an elderly woman. I don't know how much she is, 70, 80s. And I had actually given her the Hugh Howey Wool book, which is a dystopian story about humans that have been living underneath the surface of the earth for 500 years. It's maybe not as dark as mine, but it's kind of close. And I thought she would really enjoy it. I love the Wool series. But she read like I think 2 chapters or 3 chapters and gave the book back and said, "This is just way too dark. I can't take it." So when I had this coming out, she's always been one of my proofreaders, and I reluctantly gave it to her because I said she's not going to finish this. There's no way. It's just going to be way too dark. And I gave it to her on a Friday. Saturday around 5 p.m. she calls me, and I thought she was going to say, listen, John, I just can't read this anymore. Instead, she said, I'm done. She read the whole thing in one day. And she just loved it. I mean, she didn't find it too dark. Well, she said she didn't think she could handle the movie version, but but apparently Domestico took the edge off.
When I was reading it, I'm thinking to myself that this would make a great piece of cinema as well. It is almost crafted just for that vehicle, that medium. So I would hope that they turn it into a movie at some point and give you a bit of royalties. But one final thing, I know that you have to go, John. You talk about the golden rule in there, and actually you inform us about other cultures that had similar things. And I was fascinated by that. And in our letters back and forth, I mentioned to you that I went to the United Nations in 1987 with my wife. There was no tours that I knew about, and we just walked onto the property, and there was a sign there saying you're now leaving the United States territory, which was a little disconcerting, but still we walked into this no man's land of the United Nations. And the reason I mention this is because it plays a big part in how this world of yours that you're describing is destroyed. And the central character is the Secretary General of the United Nations. But anyway, we walked there. We walked into the main building, looked into the chamber where everybody sits, not the Security Council, but the General Assembly. And outside, it had this mosaic there. And I remember looking at it. And on the mosaic, it said, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which you talk about in your book. And I only found out recently that that was, after I read your book, I looked it up, that was a Norman Rockwell mosaic dedicated to the United Nations by Nancy Reagan.
Yeah.
And I was there watching it, and I remember thinking to myself, two things. Does that apply to sadomasochists? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
And secondly, why do unto others at all, which is more or less the raison d'etre of the United Nations and that kind of a globalist type of.
There's a lot of logical fallacies, as Domestico says, with that maxim. The silver rule, I thought, actually was more ethical and moral than the golden rule, because the silver rule was do not do unto others what you would not have done unto yourself. And that doesn't require you to do anything. It just limits, obviously don't harm other people. But it still has problems too, because like if you are a masochist, maybe like you hurt yourself, so you don't mind hurting other people. So it still has a lot of issues. But it ended up being like kind of the culminating theme in the book, because the themes to the large degree is about consent.
Yes.
And even though no one in the story is actually being forced into the metaverse, it's very similar to the COVID mandates, because we're not forcing you into the metaverse. We're just going to destroy your world, make it unlivable. And the only place where you can exist is buried beneath the ground in these very dark tombs we've created, or you can enter the metaverse. And that's similar to like the COVID mandate. You don't have to get the shot. You just can't fly a plane, go to a restaurant, use the gym, go to church. It's just a long list of.
But that's your choice.
It's your choice. And to some degree, it was true. It was still people's choice. And when some people tell me they didn't have a choice, I would say you still did, but you were highly coerced, and they knew the line. Your money or your life. You have a choice. Yeah. Well, especially when they were talking about taking people's jobs away. And so anyways, that is, I don't want to, I'm trying to avoid spoiling the ending, because the golden rule ends up being twisted a little to enable certain things to happen in the story. And it was almost one of those things where it's like, I don't know if what Domestico does at the end was right or wrong, and he didn't either, especially being a robot, but he did it anyways. And it's one of those things where it felt right to me, even though logically there's still problems with it. And I think that comes back to, kind of being human, because sometimes we do things that just feel right, and we don't have the mental capability to decipher all the variables that made us know that's the right thing to do. Yeah. I've been learning a lot as a novelist, and then other stuff I've been doing, that emotions in themselves, human emotions, have an enormous amount of information in them that it almost overrides the mind. It's like the mind can't. So I'm not sure what exactly I'm discovering or finding, but I do think that emotions are directly linked to being in a physical form. And I think if we were to escape into these ethereal, ethernet, internet, metaverse type of realities, whether we're doing with implants or just, you know, too much absorbed in social media or something like that, we're going to lose that ability to have real human, healthy human emotional experiences.
Yeah,
And if we don't have that, well, life's going to just look bland.
I just hope this book isn't prophetic because just to put a finer point to it, when I went to the United Nations in 1987, like I said, there was no restrictions. Went there, no problem, no tour guide, nobody stopped us. Today, if you go on to Street View, the entire area is surrounded by bollards, by high metal fences, by security cameras everywhere, checkpoints. And to get onto the ground, you have to arrange for a tour at least an hour before across the street. And it's like night and day. We went from this open society, trusting society back in 1987 to today, where we're starting to encroach upon the theme of your latest novel, John. All the Humans Are Sleeping. Highly recommended, entertaining, and makes you think. Just like my son, when we watched The Matrix, gosh, he must have been 7 or 8 years old. We come out, yeah, pretty young for The Matrix, I know. Maybe 10. Maybe
Yeah,
10.
it's okay.
But anyway, we come out of The Matrix, and I said, whoa, what did you think of that? And he goes, made me think. I still remember that. Well, this
Cool.
this book will make you think. Thank you, John, for writing it and for entertaining me once again.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, just repeat, people can just go to allthehumans.com and get the free sample or just go ahead and buy it. There's a lot of extra little bonuses they get, both if they grab the sample or if they buy the book. So, uh,
Blazingpinecone.com.
yeah. Well, if they go to allthehumans.com, it'll bring them right to the section of the website for all the humans. But yeah, they can go to Blazing Pinecone. They can go to blazingpinecone.com. And if you haven't bought much ado about Corona, throw that in the shopping cart while you're on your way out.
I recommend that one too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this interview.
It's been my pleasure, John. Thank you.